Hey, this is Vu, and this is going to be my top 10 things to try and improve. And these are all things that I've done videos on in the past. So if you want to watch those, take a look in the description and you can click on each one. But this is just a way to compile them together. So the first one is that crosshair placement is a shortcut to good aim. Generally, this means that, when you think of aim, what you're really thinking of is your time to kill, how fast you can kill an opponent when they enter your screen, because that's all that really matters. So when you think about, aim, that means your time to kill. That means your crosshair placement is incredibly important. And peeking out on certain angles while looking directly at where their head is going to be if they are there is incredibly important then to your speed to actually kill your opponents. And just making sure that you're strafing in narrow peeking angles, looking directly at where their head is going to be and going one by one, clearing these angles out is going to make you a significantly better player, and it's going to make you feel like your aim is better because you're killing players quicker, when in reality is just your crosshair placement. Next up is the importance of a non-static playstyle. And this means that you're constantly keeping your opponents guessing and not letting them figure out your playstyle and how you're going to play on a given round. And that doesn't only mean, you play passive, but you play a different angle every round when you play passive. You play one round first oranges and one round second oranges, but rather it means that you're sometimes going aggressive and you're sometimes going passive. And if you think about it, if you go aggressive on the first few rounds of a game on Banana here on Inferno, and you toss, a smoke towards bottom banana, you toss a molly towards the middle of the area here and try and molly them out and push down, what are they going to do the next time that they're trying to take banana? Well, the next time they're trying to take banana, now they're going to assume that this is a possible play you can make. They're going to use extra utility trying to deal with that. They're going to waste their time, and they're going to make it easier for you later on in the round when you're playing passive for you to deal with them, because the time's going to be lower, they're going to have lower utility. It'll make it easier for you also to read where they're going to be. If they throw a molly in a certain way, you can have a decent read of it, get a good nade on top of them, things like that, because you're playing a non-static playstyle. Next up is to abuse the economy and recognize when your opponents are close to being reset, when they might be on an eco, and try to use that against them. And that's the type of thing where you can try to understand just how money works. Generally, what you want to be thinking is that as a T, if the CTs have 3 players surviving, they kind of break even on the economy. If they have 4, they're making a bit. 5, they're making quite a bit. And on the T side, if the T's have 3 players remaining, they're making a bit. 4, they're making quite a bit. And 5, they're making a ton. Whereas either team with only 2 players surviving is going to be losing a bit of money from their economy. So unless, a team has won quite a few rounds in a row, you can have a pretty good read of where their economy is at just by following how many players they've had alive for a few rounds in a row and just guessing, and you'll have a decent idea. It's not always going to be perfect, but as soon as you can read that economy, you can recognize situations in which it's better to go for a force buy or it's better to go for a full eco. If they have a ton of economy behind them, going for a force buy isn't necessarily giving you the same reward as it would when you go for a force buy when their economy is incredibly light, and by winning that, you could be putting them onto an eco. So try to pay attention to how their economy is doing and try and abuse that as much as possible to put your opponent on eco whenever you have the chance to do so. And when you're on the other side, try to make sure that when your economy is, a little bit weak, recognize that your opponents may be doing the same back to you and try and use that to your own advantage as well. Next is the idea of the right eye peak and just general geometry. So the idea is that the further you are away from the wall that you're peeking at, the better you have in terms of the less you're showing for longer when you peek into an opponent. So a lot of the time you can know that you have a slight advantage over players that are peeking close to a wall if you're peeking far back from a wall. But more relevantly, this should give you an idea that if you are peeking out close to a wall, you're putting yourself in the worst position possible to go for a peek. And this is the thing that you should be recognizing as much as possible. Whenever you're peeking an angle, always try to get as far away from that wall as possible, except for maybe a few specific exceptions. However, you generally want to be as far away from the close wall as possible when you're peeking someone, and you want to be trying to utilize the fact that you're peeking with your right eye. And people say right eye peek. I've heard before that it's just that the left side of your body is bulkier than the right, but in reality, these things work out to be the same thing, where you want to be peeking out from the right and not the left. If you're peeking out from the left, you're giving yourself a slight disadvantage because more of you is showing as if you were to peek from the right. So next is the idea of expected value. And the idea is that anything you do, you're never playing in absolutes, all right? You're not a Sith. There's no 100% or 0%. Generally, what you're doing is you're trying to maximize the rate at which something works out. So you can make an 80% successful play and it doesn't work because 80%, obviously there's 20% of the times things will go wrong. And this can help you try to improve your game because you shouldn't be looking at results-oriented thinking as much as possible. Try to look at if a play was the right play, and if it was the right play, why it was the right play, and not just judge if it was right or wrong based on whether it worked or it didn't. Very often you'll see someone make a 40, 30, 20% play that works out, and that doesn't automatically make it the correct play. Oftentimes you can find a better play that's more 60 or 70% successful. And of course, it's hard to define, what a percent success rate is, but it's just the idea that you want to be recognizing that just the outcome doesn't define how good a play was. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Next is to find flashes that land behind your teammates. This one seems a little bit obvious, but you want to be trying to find flashes when you're executing an area, especially if you're playing with a team, where you're flashing behind teammates that no longer have to turn from that flash to not get blind. So an example is if you're on T side and you're working out A here, you can be tossing flashes that land up here that will be landing behind your teammates as they make their way out, and they don't have to turn from them. However, your opponents are going to be staring right at them as they're trying to fight. And this is kind of, if you're trying to make an executor, you're trying to support teammates that are fighting in an area, those types of flashes are usually the best ones to give you success and actually support your teammates in an effective way. So next up is the idea that impact is more important than frag count. You can have someone on your team that has half as many kills as someone else and have more impact on the outcome of the game than the player with more kills than them. Of course, half as many is pushing it a little bit, but it is a concept that's important to understand. For example, in a round, you could potentially have your team walk straight into B with 5 players, pop out, kill the 1 player, and you win the round off of 1 kill because now you have B site control with 5 players alive and they all have plenty of utility. It's almost unwinnable for the counter-terrorists. However, if they go for the retake, that's 4 kills that are being picked up. And of course, those kills aren't meaningless. If you don't get them, you're going to lose the round. However, the main kill that gave you the advantage in the round and put the other kills and made them easier, really, is the first kill. And that's the kill that had major impact. And it's important to understand that just because something is a kill, just because you're getting a frag over to your score count, doesn't mean it was anywhere near as important potentially as someone making a kill as an entry frag or making a kill in a different situation. So you want to be trying to prioritize impact when you're going for kills rather than just the frag count. Because if you get more impact, that's going to win you more rounds, even if you get less frags overall. The next one is to not hold static angles. And this is for rifles that don't have a scope, so generally you can kind of ignore this to a certain extent if you're scoped in on an angle with a Krieg or an AUG or an AWP, because these rules don't necessarily apply to the same extent. And, this is one for you don't have any other advantages. So you don't want to be holding an angle like this, where you're staying static, standing still, and waiting for someone to peek into you at an angle they are expecting. So when you're making your way out middle, this is an angle people peek, especially if you're on top of the box here. This is an angle people almost always peek. And when they peek it, they're going to be looking right at you, expecting you to be there, aiming right on your head. And as they peek out, they're going to have that second of peeker's advantage, or, not quite a second, but that moment of peeker's advantage. And they're probably going to kill you because they're aiming right where you are, and you have to adjust for their peek. You have to adjust. You have to react when you're kind of maybe bored holding the angle. they're going to have an advantage. So if you're in a situation like that, you want to be playing the idea of a peek unpeek. And that means you're peeking out, holding the angle for a second, and then backing up. And then waiting and doing the same thing again. Or you can, of course, be playing off angles, but should you want to play that angle, that's how you can potentially play it. And that means a player may come to the angle, peek it to clear it, and then move on. And once they're peeking something else, that's when you peek out and you shoot them in the side, giving yourself the advantage that they otherwise would be having. Of course, this isn't always perfect, and if you have a situation, for example, only your head is showing, I believe this is a decent example of that, although I'm not 100% sold on this angle. If only your head is showing, if you're at a really long range, or if you're at an off angle, something like this where they're not going to be peeking right at you, then you don't have to necessarily regard this rule. However, if you're holding an angle where your opponents are going to be peeking right into you, you need to be not doing that, really, unless you have an AUG, Krieg, or an AWP and are very comfortable on the angle. Otherwise, there's a very high chance they're going to kill you. And the final one to go over here is that staying alive is key. This is something that most solo bomb site holders really understand intuitively, or they've had it drilled into them, that there are more important things than getting a kill. And in any situation, generally on CT side especially, you don't want to be giving up your life to get a kill because trade frags are going to benefit the terrorist. However, very often what you don't want to be doing is taking a risk that could get you a kill but will definitely get you killed, and that's what I see a lot of people do. They take a risk that could get them maybe one frag but will guaranteed get them killed, which means you're taking a kind of low expected value play. You're taking a big risk that you might not get the kill for a reward that would just be a trade. And this is something to always keep in mind, but especially if you're soloing a bomb site, it's a situation where as soon as they kill you, you are no longer on the map and they no longer have to worry about you. So if you're in a situation like you're playing default, you get a kill and you back up, now they have to worry about you default. They have to be using utility to deal with you. They have to have people posted up on you, ready to wait for you to peek, and all of the like. However, if you get a kill and die, now they can forget about that angle and focus on the other one. So staying alive is incredibly important in a plethora of different situations, as well, not just holding a bomb site, but holding in a default, things like that, where it's incredibly important to actually make sure that you stay alive over getting an extra kill more often than not. Of course, very often these things do kind of line up where you can't just get a kill and hide, as they'll peek into you and eventually kill you. But at the same time, you don't want to be unnecessarily putting yourself in a situation where you're going to die if you can help it. And sometimes waiting for support to show up and, use a flash for you potentially to help you get another kill is more important rather than going for a second kill and immediately dying. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped. Damn, I'm really glad you enjoyed that content. If you'd like more, you can subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/VuCSGO, or my second channel. I'm creating a second channel for more in-depth pro-focused play and analysis. Things like, for example, why Bentet is so damn good, why Automatic is so good, why JW is so good, why Olaf is so good, lots of videos of that type of content, and sometimes the fabled, why someone is so bad, why you, VuCSGO, are so bad.